Crucifixion, even the word itself sends shivers down our spines. It evokes images of immense suffering and pain. It was the Roman Empire's most brutal form of capital punishment, reserved for the most heinous of criminals and rebels. A gruesome spectacle designed not just to end a life, but to utterly humiliate and break the condemned. It was a public display meant to instill fear.
Imagine the scene. A man, stripped naked, nailed to a rough-hewn wooden cross. The crowd jeers and mocks him, adding to his suffering. The pain would have been unimaginable, shooting through his hands and feet with every movement. Each breath would be a struggle. His body would sag, making it difficult to breathe. The weight of his own body would crush his lungs. Exposure to the elements added to the torment. The sun's relentless heat and the cold night's chill would be unbearable. The scorching sun would bake his skin, while the cold night air would chill him to the bone. The temperature extremes would wreak havoc on his body. Dehydration would set in, leaving his throat parched and his body racked with fever. His lips would crack and his eyes would burn with fever. And then there was the blood loss. The constant flow of blood would weaken him further. The nails driven through his hands and feet would have severed major arteries, causing a slow and agonizing bleed-out. Each drop of blood would bring him closer to death. Death by crucifixion was a drawn-out, excruciating affair. It could take hours, even days, for the condemned to finally succumb.
Yes, it was truly a horrific way to die, a method of execution that left an indelible mark on history and human consciousness. The Romans were masters of cruelty, perfecting the art of inflicting pain and suffering. They understood that the true power of crucifixion lay not just in the physical pain it inflicted, but in the psychological torture it wrought, breaking the spirit of the condemned. It was a public spectacle, a gruesome warning to anyone who dared to defy Roman authority, a display of ultimate power and control.
Crucifixion was a slow death, sometimes taking days, with the victim enduring unimaginable agony. The condemned would linger on the cross, their suffering on full display for all to see, a morbid form of entertainment for the masses. The intention was clear: to break the person's spirit, to humiliate them in their final moments, ensuring their last breaths were filled with despair. Historical records and medical knowledge confirm the horrific efficacy of Roman crucifixion, detailing the excruciating pain and slow suffocation. Ancient writers like Josephus and Cicero described it as the most cruel and shameful death, a fate worse than any other.
Modern medical experts have confirmed the agonizing physiological effects of crucifixion, noting the severe trauma inflicted on the body. Leaving little doubt that survival was virtually impossible, the method was designed to ensure a prolonged and painful demise. The Romans were meticulous in their cruelty, ensuring that death by crucifixion was agonizingly certain, with no chance of escape. It was a punishment from which there was no escape. Or so they thought, as the condemned faced their inevitable end. The story of Jesus of Nazareth is one of the most well-known in history. He was a Jewish preacher and healer who proclaimed a message of love, forgiveness, and the coming kingdom of God. His teachings attracted a large following, but also aroused the suspicion and hostility of the religious authorities of his day.
Accused of blasphemy and sedition, Jesus was arrested, tried, and condemned to death by crucifixion. His followers were devastated. Their hopes and dreams seemed to die with him on that cross. On the third day after his crucifixion, something extraordinary happened. A small group of women went to Jesus' tomb to anoint his body with spices, as was the Jewish custom. But when they arrived, they found the tomb empty. The stone that had sealed the entrance had been rolled away, and Jesus' body was gone. Confused and frightened, the women ran to tell the disciples.
At first, the disciples were skeptical. How could this be? Their Lord and Master, the one they had seen crucified and buried, was now somehow alive. It seemed impossible.
But then something remarkable began to happen. Jesus appeared to his followers not as a ghost or a figment of their imagination, but as a living, breathing person. He bore the marks of his crucifixion, yet he was undeniably alive.
The Gospels record multiple appearances of the risen Jesus. He appeared to Mary Magdalene in the garden near the tomb. He appeared to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. He appeared to the 11 disciples in the upper room, even Thomas, who had initially doubted.
These were not isolated incidents. The Apostle Paul, writing a few decades after Jesus' death, states that Jesus appeared to more than 500 people at once, many of whom were still alive at the time of his writing. Of all the disciples, Thomas is perhaps the most relatable. His story resonates with many of us because it reflects a natural human tendency to question and seek proof. He was not present when Jesus first appeared to the others, and he refused to believe their testimony. Thomas needed to see with his own eyes and touch with his own hands to be convinced.
Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. His words echo the sentiments of many who struggle with faith.
Thomas represents the skeptic in all of us, the one who demands evidence before believing. His doubt is not a sign of weakness, but a quest for truth. Yet, even in his doubt, we see a glimmer of hope. His desire to believe was strong, but he needed something tangible to hold on to. Thomas longed to believe, but he needed proof. His journey is a testament to the struggle between faith and doubt. And proof is precisely what he received. His skepticism was met with undeniable evidence. A week later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples, this time with Thomas present. This moment was pivotal for Thomas.
Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. These words were a direct response to Thomas's earlier demands.
Thomas, overcome with awe and wonder, fell to his knees. His reaction was one of profound reverence and realization.
My Lord and my God. This declaration marked the transformation of his doubt into faith.
In that moment of profound realization, Thomas's doubt transformed into unshakable faith. His story reminds us that doubt can lead to deeper understanding and stronger belief. The appearances of the risen Jesus were not mere apparitions, they were physical encounters.
Jesus ate with his disciples, talked with them, and even invited them to touch his wounds. He was not a ghost or a spirit, but a resurrected being, fully human and fully divine.
These encounters had a profound impact on the disciples. They were transformed from a group of grieving, disillusioned men into bold proclaimers of the resurrection.
They were willing to face persecution, imprisonment, and even death for their belief that Jesus was alive.
What could have caused such a radical transformation? What could have convinced these men, who had witnessed Jesus' crucifixion with their own eyes, that he was truly alive?
The answer is simple yet profound. They had seen the risen Lord.
Please like, subscribe, and share this powerful truth. Section 7, The Price of Faith.
The resurrection of Jesus was not a private affair. It was a public event witnessed by hundreds of people, and it came with a cost.
The disciples' proclamation of the resurrection, their unwavering belief in a resurrected Messiah, ignited a firestorm of opposition. The Roman authorities, threatened by the rapidly spreading movement, unleashed a wave of persecution against the early Christians.
The disciples were arrested, beaten, and imprisoned. Some were exiled, while others faced even more gruesome fates. The Apostle James, Jesus' own brother, was stoned to death in Jerusalem. The Apostle Peter was crucified upside down in Rome. The Apostle Paul was beheaded.
These men who had lived with Jesus, who had seen his miracles and heard his teachings, were willing to die rather than renounce their faith. Section 8, A Legacy Forged in Blood.
The martyrdom of the disciples is a powerful testament to the truth of the resurrection. These were not men who were easily swayed by wishful thinking or mass hysteria. They had lived with Jesus, seen his power, and witnessed his death. Yet something happened that convinced them, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Jesus was alive. They had seen him, touched him, and spoken with him after his death. Their faith was not based on blind belief, but on eyewitness testimony and personal experience.
The disciples' willingness to die for their belief is perhaps the strongest evidence for the resurrection. People will die for what they believe in, but they will not die for what they know to be a lie.
The disciples' martyrdom is a powerful testament to the truth of their message. Jesus is risen.
Section 9, the Unyielding Truth.
The evidence for the resurrection is compelling. The empty tomb, the eyewitness accounts, the post-resurrection appearances, and the transformation of the disciples all point to the reality of this earth-shattering event.
The resurrection is not just a religious belief, it is a historical claim. And like any historical claim, it can be examined, investigated, and debated. But the evidence, when weighed fairly and objectively, points to a singular conclusion. Jesus of Nazareth rose from the dead.
This is the unyielding truth that has echoed through the centuries, inspiring hope, transforming lives, and challenging worldviews. It is a truth that demands a response.
Section 10. A call to believe. The resurrection of Jesus is not just an ancient miracle, it is a living hope. It is a promise that death does not have the final word, that love is stronger than hate, and that light will always triumph over darkness. The question is, what will you do with this truth? Will you dismiss it as a myth, a legend, or a fairy tale, or will you allow it to penetrate your heart, to challenge your assumptions, and to transform your life? The choice is yours. But know this, the resurrection is not just a story from the past. It is an invitation to experience the power of the living God in the here and now. It is a call to believe.